Hi everyone, and welcome to Raccoon Laboratory. I am Charlie. Um, it is still hot, but it's cooling down a little bit. The studio is a little bit nicer today, so that's great. I just got into an argument on Twitter, which was a terrible mistake, so now I'm in a weird mood. So I'm going to try and work through it on the internet with you guys. So hopefully I can be in a better mood after drawing for a little bit. Today, we're going to talk about, I think I mislabeled the video. We are going to talk about balance and composition. So this video is actually going to be pretty different from many of the previous ones. Normally, when we do Raccoon Laboratory drawing videos, we've been drawing by observation, and we like to focus on learning to eliminate the things in between your observations and what your hand is doing on the page. And today things are going to be a little bit different. We're actually going to be working abstractly. So we're going to be working with marks as a material on the page. And the way we do that is a little complicated. It's a little bit esoteric. But I want to kind of describe this process of what in dance is called somatic movement. So this is sort of the equivalent in drawing. So what you're going to be doing is putting marks down on a page and then really paying attention to how those marks make you feel in terms of what your expectations are, what your judgments are, and what your emotions are. And you might be surprised by how strong your convictions are. Even if you can't quite explain why you have set up certain visual expectations or why you're having a reaction to what is a really simple abstract drawing, we're going to try to cultivate that sense, that feeling. And I'm going to describe that as composition. I'm going to describe it as sort of balance. For me, it feels kinesthetic. It feels almost bodily. There's a kind of like energy to the page. And there are a lot of elements that go into this, and there are a lot of different ways of thinking about it. But I think the best way to do it is just to try it. So that's what we're going to do. So this page right here is a page of drawings I made on Thursday with this like way of thinking about drawing in mind. These are all abstract compositions. We're going to do this exercise towards the end where we just try out a bunch of abstract compositions. At the end here. And so if you haven't joined us before, welcome. Normally I draw with a Sharpie, and I do that for a couple of reasons. One is that it's easier to see on camera, and don't feel like you have to use a Sharpie just because I do. But the other reason, and the reason I do recommend it if you're willing to try it, is because the permanence of the marker forces you to commit to the decisions you're making. So there's something a little bit different about putting marks down on a page when you really have to commit to what you're doing and can't sort of like feather it or tweak it. You just have to sort of live on the page a little bit and deal with the consequences of the marks that you've made. And especially when we're talking about composition and when we're working abstractly with the ink as a material, then it starts to, this stuff might make a little more sense to you guys. Like you're reacting to what is happening on the page. So if you're constantly able to change what's happening on the page, then you don't have room to like make a gesture and then respond with another gesture and then respond to that with another gesture, which is the process we're going to get into. So without further ado, I am going to let's get going. Let's get drawing. Oh, and hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to the chat. Feel free to post questions if you have any. And I will periodically check the chat. Selena, thank you for joining us. Very excited to have you here. Okay. So we're going to start with a blank page. on this page, I am going to put a mark. Now, immediately, I feel that I want some kind of an element, like a grounding element here. I am thinking about the fact that the sticky note is slightly crooked in relation to the square of the page. So if you guys are following along at home, I want you to try and put a mark down on your page. And we're just going to respond to these marks, right? So let's say I put it here, way up at the top here. So now I'm feeling inclined towards something different. Like I feel like I want to put an element here. I feel like these are just sticky notes that I happen to have around. They're literally my reminders to myself about my class this week. I want to put something here. And the reason is I want some kind of a balanced composition. And so what do I mean by that? How does that work? So the way this was explained to me at Ohio State by a very talented painting professor is that a neutral composition is a cross. I think this is a slight exaggeration, but it's a useful explanation. So basically, we are judging the elements on a page automatically. We're like subconsciously doing this. So we are relating the elements on a page to the edges and to the margins and to each other. And so we have weird expectations that we are bringing to the drawing already without having thought about it, without having any specific intention. So as soon as you add an element onto the page, you are knocking the composition out of balance. All of a sudden, anywhere I put an element is somehow weighting the composition towards it. I'm going to describe this in terms of weight, in terms of as if these elements are objects. And you're going to find that I think it's a helpful metaphor because balance seems to be really critical. It seems to be an important part of how the thing works. So let's say, I'll just give you a quick example of a really unbalanced composition, and then we're going to actively balance a composition together. So let's say I have this right here, kind of hanging off the page, and then I have this right here. The reason this is a really unbalanced composition is that your eyes, as you navigate the drawing, you fall out of the drawing. And we want the drawing to hold your attention inside of it. And so I want to try to eliminate the barrier that we conceive of between the person viewing the drawing when it's done, your audience, and you as you're making the drawing. You are going to be continuously evaluating that balance for yourself as you're working. And if the drawing sends you off the page, or if the drawing sends you in a particular direction or weights you towards a particular element of the drawing, then we're going to need to balance it out with something basically across the drawing. So we're just going to continually do that. All right, so let's try that. So I'm actually going to now commit. I'm going to leave the cross up there. I never make a cross when I'm trying to make a good drawing. I only do this for demonstrations. So only put the cross on your page if you find it helpful, because it's kind of weird to have a drawing with a cross in the middle. All right, so let's put a little element somewhere and see what happens. So I put this little triangle here. Immediately I want some kind of grounding, but like light element. You can see I'm kind of across. I also, in my compositions, I tend to be biased towards something that feels heavy because I think there's something to our expectations that objects have weight, even though I'm not rendering an object. These are just marks on a page. I think we still kind of apply gravity to our understanding of verticality in an image. And then I think I want some kind of element here to start to use the rest of that page. Maybe it's broken up a little bit. And then I think I want something towards the center. Cool. So this is okay. I might want something. I think I want something here too. So I want you to try this. I want you to try putting marks on a page and then responding to them, balancing out your composition just by feel. Don't worry so much about whether you're doing it right or wrong. Just like trust your instincts. And it's going to become easier to feel the more you do this. And it's also going to become easier to feel the more you look at drawings and paintings. It's going to change your expectations. So check out what happens when I darken this triangle over here. Composition's way different now, right? So even though we have all of these different elements on the page, they aren't vying for our attention in the same way. So now I'm drawn right to this triangle. It seems way heavier than everything else in terms of how it's pulling me in. So I think I want to add some kind of element here to kind of fight that. And I was unsure of that decision. I think it definitely pulls your attention. Now your attention is vibrating a little bit better between the two of them. Maybe I could make it slightly more interesting or varied. But what I've also done is I've introduced a new category of mark. Because now, as you look at this element, I don't know about you, but my brain presumes that these shapes are somehow inside of this edge, like you're looking at the mouth of a cave or something. And part of why I like to do this lesson is I think it's shocking how quickly emergent, evocative elements just come out of our marks. I had no intention at all of depicting a receding space in this image, but I did it by accident. And the difference between a really good drawing and a drawing by an amateur is whether the artist takes responsibility for those emerging elements. If you're drawing this way, there are many people who draw in a very pre-planned way. But if you're drawing reactively, it becomes your job to notice what is emerging in the drawing, take responsibility for it, and either push it forward or sort of make a counterpoint to it to soften it, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to check the chat real quick to see if we have any questions or anything. Okay, cool. All right, so let's deepen this a little bit. I think I'm going to darken these elements here. I think a lot of the things that happen by accident when you're making marks on a page happen when you don't control for new elements. And what do I mean by that? I think I'm a person who's inclined to introduce a lot of variation into the things that I do as experiments. When I'm just putting marks on a page, I love to play with new marks, just see what happens, because I'm excited by these emerging possibilities. I think it's really weird that these things show up the way that they do. And notice how different this image looks. I just filled in some of these marks, and already it feels like a completely different image. So I feel like that's really effective, so I'm going to start to fill in more of these shapes. Not all of them, but I'm going to introduce a little more push and pull by having some darker shapes here. But many artists will just iterate on the same few shapes, the same few kinds of marks over and over again. If you look at really successful abstract expressionist painters of the 20th century, many of them sort of develop a mature style. I think in part this is just like market pressure, like people have to make work that's recognizable as theirs and will sell. I think that's true. But also I think many really serious, mature painters end up feeling like they can control certain kinds of marks, certain kinds of brushstrokes. So I'm thinking about a painter like Mark Rothko. If you look at Rothko's paintings, they're all very, very similar. And they're these nearly identical experiments, but with different colors laid on top of and next to each other in similar ways over and over and over again. And he's controlling for all of the possible emergent qualities if he, let's say, switched up his brushstroke or changed the changed the way that he put paint on the canvas, basically. So let's keep going with this drawing. I think I'm interested in the way that it's turning out. So I'm going to add a little bit more variety and depth to these marks here. I think I'm just the kind of person, I don't really like to do the same thing twice. So I like to kind of switch it up. Okay, interesting. So I've noticed something that just happened for me as I was looking at this image is now that I darkened some aspect of every shape, everything kind of pulled to the front. It's all on one plane. It kind of feels like it's all equal. And I actually think I don't like that. I think I want something that feels behind, or that feels less important, that feels less defined. So I think I'm going to add some marks somewhere that feel a little more loose and that feel a little less clear. And notice again that illusion of space. Without it being purposeful, we're inclined to think of objects in space even when we're drawing in 2 dimensions. We just imagine this third dimension into the image. All right, so I like that. It's becoming a little more complicated now, and I find that I'm drawn near the center of the image. My eye is sort of led around, which is what we're looking for. I'm kind of milling about the image, so I think I want to put a circle here. Not a complete circle. I don't think I want it to be a shape. I think I want it to be more of like a gesture. So I'm going to break it up a little bit. Put some squiggles in there. I think I want it to have just a little darkness because there's so much boldness in the rest of this image. And again, I'm sort of continuing a shape having broken it up. So like this shape implies that it sort of continues past here. And all of a sudden we're getting all of these graphic associations. It almost looks like a comic illustration. Now we imagine that there's some kind of white shape blocking this shape. And again, none of that is explicit. All of that is implied. It's all emergent. I didn't really plan any of that, but it's all happening. So I am really curious about your drawings. Please feel free to send me your drawings. You can send them to the Firebird Community Arts Facebook account. I believe it's just at Firebird Community Arts on Instagram. We would love to take a look at your drawings and talk to you about them. Okay, we're going to do this again, but now with a blank page. So let's do that. All right, so I'm just going to put a mark somewhere. I'll say here. And then I think I want to ground it somehow, like literally make a kind of ground. I feel like even though the composition is unbalanced, that kind of gives the implication that all of this verticality is now purposeful. Now I have a sort of open world here. And so I think I want to throw a curve in. And I think I want to fight that curve a little bit. And now I feel inclined to give it some kind of a closed shape here. And then that totally changes the rest of these marks, because now they feel so thin in comparison to this object, which is enclosed. It's more present. And I wasn't sure I wanted to do that, but I did it, and now I'm stuck with it. So then I'm going to give this a little more life here, so it's going to become a pattern. And then, let's see. I'm liking those circles towards the middle, so I'm going to put this here, and then another one of these here, and then another one here. And then I want to find some way to kind of make sense of these marks. They feel a little too loose, so maybe I can here, I'll put a box here. I like that. I love drawing like this just because there's very little intention. It's just reactive, which I know isn't for everybody, but I think it's amazing to see what kinds of emergent properties, what emergent weirdo effects can happen when you're just playing with your own perceptions in 2 dimensions, and you're dealing with just like the mechanics of your hand on the page. When I used to live in Denver, the Clifford Still Museum is in downtown Denver, and they have what I think are a collection of like really lovely paintings, and they also have an archive of all his old drawings. And I convinced them to let me see many of his old drawings and handle them and kind of study them. And it's funny, I feel like, I think by many he's considered to be a kind of masterful painter, a masterful abstract expressionist painter, and he has this way of making weird abstract compositions that really seem to hold together, even though they're like really unusual. They're pretty radical in certain ways. And I think I just noticed one of the things that's consistent about his paintings and about his marks is just that he's right-handed. So it's like, I don't know, there's a lot of philosophy and theory around why these kinds of emergent properties come out of paintings, and I think people tend to imbue the process of painting with a kind of like mysticism, and I love that stuff, I'm into that stuff, but I think it's also funny that like there are all these little accidental elements that seem kind of arbitrary, like the fact that I draw with my right hand, so I'm inclined towards certain kinds of marks. I'm mechanically inclined towards making certain things happen, and that's true of you depending on what tool you're using. Pencils work a certain way. You're inclined towards putting certain kinds of shapes on the page because of the tool that you're using. So I definitely think everybody should experiment. See what happens when you switch it up. I definitely feel like I haven't gotten rid of my inclination towards, towards landscape or something. I feel like that's definitely in here. Like it kind of feels like a space. I feel like that comes up over and over again when I make abstract images. They often feel like spaces. Which, that feels natural. It makes sense that we're inclined towards spaces, at least to me. Okay, I like what's happening, but it's getting kind of chaotic, so I think I need a real... I need something to really ground us. I think I'm going to do kind of big shape that goes behind things and through things. And then I'm going to double it. Ooh. And then I think I want to break that up a little bit. I don't love it, but I think I also, want to emphasize that in itself is kind of interesting. Like, what is there to love or not love about this image? I think it might seem obvious, but for me it's actually kind of a confusing question. I think I can, explore my feelings about it. I try to be really honest and in touch with how it makes me feel, but we're dealing with really weirdo, abstract stuff. So sometimes it's hard to say why it's making me feel some way. Okay, I think we're close to being ready to call it quits on this one. I think I want to add just another little an element that's kind of fading in here. Okay, good enough for me. All right, so let's take a little break real quick, and I want everybody to just checking that my camera is still working. I want everybody to just take a moment, and I want you to try and focus on your breath and just breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth and in through your nose and out through your mouth. And if you feel yourself getting distracted, just let the thoughts go past. And just try and keep your attention on your breath. And I want you to try and scan from the top of your head all the way down to your eyes and ears, and then to your jaw, to your neck and shoulders, all the way down your body, and just notice how those parts of your body feel. Once you get to your feet, just bring the attention back to your breath. Okay. I like to do that at the beginning, or maybe to take a break from drawing to kind of recenter ourselves, especially when we're dealing with something this esoteric. I think meditation is just a useful metaphor for drawing, and Normally, when I bring up meditation and drawing, it's because I want us to pay attention to the outline of the object we're observing as if it's our breath. So that's the thing we're continually returning our attention to when we're drawing something that's real. But in this case, we aren't drawing anything that's real. And I find often there is sort of a question hanging over any blank page. I think blank paper can be really, really intimidating to people. It certainly is to me. I think it can be hard to know how to get started, and it can be hard to feel confident that that your first decision is a good one. And so I think people will often overplan. I think people will often, maybe overthink what it takes to make an interesting drawing or painting. And in this case, I'm trying to teach you a way of drawing where if you're able to really stay tuned into how you feel as you're drawing, then it doesn't matter where you start, because by starting, you're throwing the composition of the page wildly off balance. So the first mark is a mistake, and then you're making a drawing as a way of rebalancing that mistake. So you throw the page wildly off balance, and then you add a gesture, but inevitably that gesture isn't enough to totally rebalance the page. Now things have become complicated in a new way. And so then your next gesture tries to balance those three things. And you can just continue on the page like this until every now and then you'll be really surprised, but you will have a beautiful, beautiful drawing that seems like it came out of nowhere. And it just made perfect sense as you were doing it. You were just sort of correcting for the way that things were to get the drawing to a place that that you wanted it to get to without really knowing that that's what you wanted. So this is a kind of emergent, accidental drawing style. So what we're going to do next is we are going to start drawing thumbnails. So what I want you to do is turn to a new page. Oh, that's wild. The change in lighting in the video is the reflection of the paper onto my face. That's unbelievable. I'm learning so much about cameras by doing this. Okay, so back to the point. So I'm going to draw, let's say, 6 boxes of roughly equal size. They don't have to be perfect. Part of the point of this exercise is about introducing the inconsistencies of your hand onto the page, right? Because if you were here to make a perfect composition, you would just leave the page blank. We're not interested in a perfect composition. We're interested in an interesting composition. So all we need is for that page to become weird and interesting and to try to hold our attention and not throw us off the page. I think, what the heck, let's do 9. And so the purpose of drawing all these little boxes are so that these compositions and these drawings can become a little less precious. So we're just going to go one after the other, introducing some weirdo element onto the page and then trying to balance it out. I really just want you to pay attention to how you feel about whatever we add onto the page. So let's start with this one. I'm going to add this little mark. And then quickly, I'm inclined towards doing this. Sometimes it's just immediately visualized for me what I want to do next. And I think that just comes with, having done this a lot. It's funny too how all of a sudden I add a little dot. This looks anthropomorphic to me. It looks like like a chameleon or something. Okay, love that. Think that's great. Let's move on to something else. Let's see what we can do here. I want this. I think I like that as it is. I know it's really simple, but for me, definitely, I've been making art and thinking about art for a really long time, and I definitely, especially as a glassblower, things get to a point where I'm going to make them worse by messing with them further. And I think that's really worth noticing, you know? Okay. Yeah, sometimes you get like a nice little thing just happens. So I hope you're following along. I hope you're trying this. And by that I don't mean, you can if you really want to, but I don't mean copy my drawings. Again, you can, but I'd love it if you were reacting to your own compositional gestures, just putting a mark down, putting another mark down. See if you can rebalance it. See if you can you can find some interesting element to show up on the page. It's going to be a controversial move here. Controversial within my own brain. But fortune favors the bold. Something like that. I'm not sure if I made the right choice. But that's fine. Maybe I'll add a little something down here. Balance that out a little bit. I like that. Okay. Let's do another one up here. This one's loose. That feels nice. Scribbly. It's different. I like it. Cool. Weird. If you are unsure of your compositions, if you kind of can't tell what your preferences are, or if you're making the right kinds of choices, I'd say try turning them, and try and see, like, do I like it better this way? Do I like it better this way? My hand is covering some of them. Do I like them better this way? And the point isn't to figure out. The point isn't like whether reorienting the page makes the image better. The point is to discover that you have an opinion about it. So even if you don't know why you have an opinion about it, you probably do. You probably have a preference. Like if you had to choose between them, you would pick one over the other. And so you can slowly work backwards from that feeling, from that preference, to like inform the decisions you make moving forward. All right, so let's do another one. Cool. Camera's still working. My camera has been overheating lately because it's been so hot. So I'm really glad it's still working. Whoa, weird. This little connection is really weird. Now I gotta deal with that. I feel like this drawing is corny. Which again, what am I even talking about? That's the point. Okay, I'm gonna do this. I think the one danger of working this way, because you're constantly making value judgments, you're really constantly asking, is this good? Which is better? Oh, I like that actually. It can be really easy, especially if you're pretty new to drawing to beat yourself up because you don't like your drawings. And I am here to tell you that that is like extremely unhelpful, and I really don't want you to beat yourself up if you think your drawings are bad. It's totally unhelpful. This isn't about how you feel about yourself or your skills. This is, you're just drawing to think about the page, what's on the page. And also to know that even if you don't like something, you can keep going. You can continually change it and transform a drawing that isn't working into one that really is. And I think that's really exciting. Okay, let's do this, and then I'm going to move on to the other one. Okay, let's see. I'm going to leave that as it is. I like that. I feel like that one just fell apart. Can't even tell what to do. I'm just going to keep going, see what I can make happen. I often find that if I'm making lots of little granular connections, or I'm sorry, granular corrections, then it's because like something big went wrong. I can't always put my finger on it, but sometimes it's better to just start over. It's definitely another thing I learned by blowing glass. That looks nicer. I think I'm going to leave that as it is. All right, and the final one. I'm going to check real quick. And Selena says she generally hates how abstract she is, but I'm making her value it more. I'm so glad to hear that. I think abstraction is really, really useful. I think it's a really useful tool for thinking. I think it's also really useful for accessing your own unconscious beliefs and accessing your un and subconscious like predispositions. I think these things come out on the page, and it's really useful. You can like learn all kinds of stuff about yourself and all kinds of stuff about the world that we've just accepted as being true by drawing. So let's do the last one. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Okay, here's our last one. Notice how different it is when I make closed shapes as opposed to marks. Like, I'm using the same tool, it's in the same format, but it feels radically different. Space just feels different. Now, when I draw a shape inside the shape, this feels like the background, this feels like the foreground. Anyway, none of that is explicit, it's all implied. And again, these I'm describing my experience just so you can kind of get a sense of what I mean when I talk about these things, but your interpretations probably, like almost certainly, are different than mine, and that's great. I think that's perfectly valid and interesting, and it's the differences between the way that we interpret these abstract elements that, you know, um, that make it worth talking to other people about things, because we all have different predispositions. We all, we all have different interpretations. And I'm not the kind of person who thinks that those interpretations or predispositions come from nowhere or are meaningless. I actually don't think that they're arbitrary. I think they come from our experiences. I think they come from collective communication, whether that's through art or through shared experiences or any number of things. So I think we learn about the world by discovering each other's unconscious understanding of like abstract principles. I like that one. I think that's cool. All right, and we are nearing the end of our time. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys tuning in and supporting this show. If you want to support Firebird Community Arts, we're always accepting donations. We're a nonprofit on the west side of Chicago. They very generously have supported me through the coronavirus quarantine by allowing me to stream on this channel. So I really appreciate that from Firebird. Also, if you're looking to help the west side continually recover from the COVID crisis, from the looting, I guess a month and a half ago now. Maybe, yeah, wow, a while ago now. But this neighborhood always needs help. It lacks opportunities. It has for generations. And Happy Gallery in Ukrainian Village has been hosting a food distribution. They're accepting donations. They're also really great to the local art community year-round. But I was super impressed with their organization. As soon as there was a need, as soon as some of the grocery stores shut down, Happy Gallery was supplying the neighborhood with medical supplies, with food, and they're continually doing donations and pickups. So if you're looking for a way you can help out Chicago, check out Happy Gallery, and of course, check out Firebird Community Arts. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to do more of these videos every week. Feel free to get in touch with me through the Firebird Community Arts Instagram. If you have any questions or if you have any requests, I'm happy to tailor these videos to what you want to see. So thanks so much, and I'll see you all next Thursday.